Okay, so I'd like to welcome you today to the Open Transport session of the Future Everything Festival. My name is Dr. Thomas Birtchnell. I'm from Lancaster University. I'm a sociologist there, currently working on an ESRC-funded project called Technologies and Travel with Professor John Urry. I've got the privilege today of introducing 4 experts to discuss the issue of transport and open data. A good transportation system is key to a healthy, functioning city. Mobility of people into or through a city allows wealth to be dispersed, facilities accessed, and areas to be regenerated. By making transport data open, we have the opportunity to develop services and applications where transportation is a component, whether it be applications that integrate journey details into event listings or analysis based upon either open data sources. Okay, so I'll just give you a brief bio for the panel. David Hytch is Information Systems Director for Transport for Greater Manchester. David led the successful bid for Greater Manchester's plugged-in places investment of $7 million. He is the Trustee Director of Greater Manchester Accessible Transport Organisation and a Director of Greater Manchester Passenger Transport Information Limited. David has championed the use of open data for transport in Greater Manchester. Okay, Jonathan Raper is CEO of location-based services startup Placer Limited and visiting professor at the GI Centre, London University. Placer are open data aggregators offering added value data products through the Placer data store and smartphones apps such as UK travel options, as well as microsites such as tuberadar.com. We have Richard Russell from Google. He's been working there for the past 4 years on a variety of products, including ads, commerce, and mobile. For the past year, he's been focusing on integrating public transport data into Google Maps. We also have Tom Steinberg as well, who is a pioneer of open data access. He's done a lot of consultancy for the government and a lot of open access work as well. So first off, our panel members will each present a short introduction to the debate. Then we'll invite the audience to offer us short to the point questions to encourage general discussion. So if you could think of perhaps some questions as you're listening to the talks, that'd be awesome. Great, thank you. And just to start off, we'll have David Hytch.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've got 3 of my colleagues in the audience. You'll know who they are because they have suits and ties on. It's no good looking around. So whilst I'm happy to take any questions, they're going to be around as well, so make a note of them and please use them while they're here to answer any questions. Just to give you some context to Greater Manchester and around the transport space, there are 14,000 bus stops, 15 bus stations, 50 tram stops, which is doubling over the next few years, 200 plus train stations, 2,000 bus routes, 300 million passenger journeys a year, 40 bus operators, all of them commercially aware and looking to run their own businesses, and 6 train operators. So quite a mixed bag, not a simple picture as they have in London, nor do we get as much money as London does either. But
sorry, David, we might just move down to the front, because can you guys see that at all? It's a bit of a, we've noticed a design flaw. So
then you can see the slides
that would be
as
easy,
well.
wouldn't it? Okay.
So I'm going to click through. A lot of this material is, I'm told, will be made available afterwards, so I'm not going to go through it. We are just at the end of an information audit, which we've been going through the end of last year, beginning of this year. We've identified about 150 transport-related data sets, and we're looking to see how we can now make those available, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But in doing that audit, we've had to look at where the source of the data's come from, who's in charge of it, which organisation does it necessarily, I say belong, but who's generated it, how's it been collected, what's the geographic coverage, etc., etc. So it's not just a simple thing to say, here's the data set, get on with it. We've already released some data, relatively simple. I've seen some use of it. I haven't seen a great deal, but always hopeful on this. We're planning to release during June car park locations, variable message sign locations, not necessarily what's on the signs. Traffic bollards, these are these fun things which residents from Cheshire get confused with in their 4x4s because they think, although it says rising bollards do not tailgate, it doesn't apply to them if they're in a large Porsche Cayenne, and inevitably they do get caught from time to time. CCTV locations and traffic signal locations. Again, we're happy to release some of this data. I'd be interested to hear what anybody is going to make of knowing where the traffic signals are per se. But there we go, I travel hopefully. Other data sets that we're planning to release during 2011, bus fare, car journey times, car occupancy, vehicle flows, etc., etc. Now, some of this data is data that we've collected ourselves. Some of it is data which is made available on a monthly basis from the DFT. Now, they don't make a big song and dance about it yet, although I am told they're beginning to understand how open data can be more significant for their activity, or at least to demonstrate they're doing something. And so our data is generally supplements that which they release. So we're working hard to get through as much of it as we can. This is a couple of three sites where there is some activity going on, which you can see that people have actually used. A couple of the references are to TfL. As I say, we've been doing this now for 6 months, and we've got a couple of applications. Nothing more yet has appeared back. I'm hoping that this event will stimulate some more. These are the reasons we've been doing it. Some of it is strategic and philosophical. Some of it, I'll be quite frank, is I have a limited budget, which has just got more limited. And I need to make sure that people who want to use any of the transport modes in Greater Manchester, be it the roads or rail or trams or buses or cycling or walking, have the best information they can that's appropriate and available to them in a form that they feel comfortable with. And I'm conscious that there's a growing segment of the population. It's no good putting up signs overhead because they're always got their heads down looking at their mobile phones as they walk along or listening to their headphones. So that's the mechanism, that's the channel that you need to address them. I also don't believe, unlike some of my colleagues elsewhere in the country, that we are the sole repository of what people should know about what's happening on the transport network. I believe that different people want to know different things. If you're over 70, you want to know some set. If you're under 15, you want to know another set. And you want it in different ways that you feel comfortable getting. So, and I couldn't possibly afford the development costs of building all of those applications, developing all of those things, and making them available. So why don't I use the talent and the capability out there, create a marketplace that is much more attuned to individual use. And there's the other issue about disposable data and disposable applications. The market will work or can work. If people like something, they'll use it. If they don't like it, they'll move on to the next thing, and there's an opportunity. Somebody told me there are something like 12,500 software developers in Greater Manchester. I want access to those people. I want them to have access to our data and to get on with it. That's not to say that we don't have a role in managing the core, some core applications that we see as critically important. What are the barriers? Well, they're all temporary, of course, because we don't like barriers. We go and knock them over. The one I would point out, and I've had 3 people ask me this morning about real-time data. I am, when we have it, more than happy to release real-time data. I want you to understand what the implication is. It is one thing to say, here's a data set on a portal like DataGM, and for you to go and get access to it. It is an entirely different matter if there is a stream of data running every 15 seconds being updated, let's say, and it's coming at you continuously. Because if you say, I want real-time data, we can turn on the tap and away it goes. You'd better work out what watering can or water butt or reservoir you want to put that data in before you start to deal with it. So there is a bit of a be careful what you wish for. It's not a threat. It's just we'll need between us to work out how is the best way to manage those streams of data. Issues. This is a range of issues which I've put up there. Some of them are serious and commercial. Some of them are more about trust and credibility. And I think there is an issue. There is certainly in some minds, maybe less radical suits than mine, about trusting people with data which they haven't had in the past. I don't subscribe to that, and I work very hard to persuade them otherwise. Incidentally, I did hear that TfL were reluctant to release some data because they were scared it was going to be used for nefarious means, such as matching nightclubs with particular bus routes, and therefore creating a safety issue for their passengers. It was pointed out to them it was going to happen anyway, so just get over yourselves. We're doing a number of things, as I say, to make best use of the data. We've just finished a pilot with a personal traveller application that runs on a mobile phone that keeps you up to, informs you as to what's happening on the journey you've pre-registered, and allows you to make, or it will recommend changes and manage your, help you manage your journey during the time you're on there. It will also tell you things like if you're not used to using the bus, it'll tell you when your bus stop is coming, and you should get off now, or you should look for these particular signs. We do want to work with companies like Google, and we are working, indeed, since we had a session about 6 weeks ago on open data, we have already moved forward quite hard on developing a better relationship around sharing map data and so forth. So that at least is something we've resolved. I'm also, we're looking at data GM. It's relatively small at the moment, but if we keep going at the rate we're going, we're going to have to think carefully about how that gets hosted. And as Transport for Greater Manchester begins to pick up the reins as to its full responsibilities, covering not just public transport but the road network, cycling and walking, then we have some other data that we want to release. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Jonathan Rafer, CEO of Nextlet. Oh, okay. You want to go next? Okay. Richard Russell from Google.
Thank you. Excellent. Now, how does this presentation work? Do I need to press a button to get the next one up there, or are you doing so? While that's going on, as soon as it comes up on there, just so I know who's here. Who here considers themselves to be a developer or in development or coding or applications and so on? Who here would be considered like government or agents, transport agencies? There's a few people there. And who would be like in, I don't know, the general user population, do you think? Just so I know. So we've got an interesting mix of people here. I sort of expected it to be mostly developers, but this is all good. Now, just so you know, Razia here, by the way, I'm just going to introduce Razia down the front. She's my colleague. So if you do want to talk to us later, feel free to grab Razia or me. What I'm going to talk about, I've got, I think, 20 minutes, is that right? 10, 5, right. Okay, so basically, talking about public transport data. When we talk about data, what I'm talking about at least, is a lot of the stuff that David talked about, in that it's multimodal, it's buses, it's trains, it's trams, it's all that sort of thing. It's and the type of data it is, it's the stop locations, it's the schedules or the timetables, and it's the live departure times of trains and buses and so on. You can imagine extending this to cover passenger load, fares, all sorts of other things. Like you can use your imagination. There's all sorts of things that are interesting. But the common thing that I have here that I'm interested in here, Google's a very user-facing company. We're very interested in user data. So this is the data that users and passengers actually are interested in. I'm pretty sure that's where we're all coming from in this particular conversation. So what do we mean by making it available? Now, if you're a user, you don't want to scan through a file or a document that has lists of numbers and so on. You don't want to look at raw data. You want an application, you want a way of interacting with it. You want to look on your phone and say, when's the next bus? You want to go on the web and plan your journey, that kind of thing. So when we're talking about making it available, we're talking about making it available through applications to end users. And as David said, a lot of transport agencies don't have the funding to develop large numbers of applications. That's where developers come in. So we're talking about getting the data to developers so that developers can get the data to end users. Now, the things that we've discovered are really important with, I'm getting a lot of echo here. The things that we've discovered are really important in regards to data are three things. First thing is format. Now, the reason we find this particularly important is because we work with a large number of different agencies, and we want to develop one piece of software that we can use for multiple agencies. So the only way to do that is to have the same format of data across multiple agencies. We work around the world. Now, if you're a software developer and you want to develop an application just for Manchester or just for London or something like that, then all you need to worry about is whatever format that is in. But if you want to expand your market to the US, to other cities, to Europe, and there are hundreds of places you can expand to, you kind of need to be able to interact with these agencies in a consistent manner. So, for example, if you have a web browser, the web browser understands HTML, which means anyone can write HTML, and your browser works for any site. You probably want to do the same thing if you're a developer. Interact with any agency. Second thing is a relationship. It's no good just having an agency sort of throwing the data out. Here it is. That's all. Right? You kind of need to have some form, some way of interacting. And this is a complicated problem because agencies can't dedicate hundreds of customer service people to answer questions from developers. But yeah, there needs to be something. There needs to be some interaction there. When you get this data and it looks a bit wrong, how do we interpret this? How do we feed this back? So there needs to be some form of relationship. And further, you need some form of understanding that by giving the data out there, it's going to be there. It's going to continue to be updated. It's no good just having, here's the timetable today. I want to know that the timetable is going to be updated if I have an application. The last thing is licensing. Now, licensing is an interesting one. If you're a business, any business, particularly a small business, you're very interested in revenue. But Google happens to be in a situation where we have a lot of revenue, so we're not too worried about revenue. But at the same time, we still need to worry about, can we put ads on this? Does it work? If you're a small developer, you want to be able to sell your application. There's no good creating an application that's wonderful that everyone loves if you don't get any money for it. So one thing here is, do we have the license to be able to make money from it? The other thing is, can we use this data and not get sued? Right? So if you go and scrape someone's site, for example, and they don't like it for some reason, they may sue you because you don't have the legal right to do so, or maybe you do. I'm not a lawyer. But you still, if you're going to develop an application and you're going to have users using it, you want to know what your legal situation is in relation to that data. So these are the three things we think are important: format, relationship, and licensing. Now, what we've done is made our font too big, so it doesn't fit on the screen. But what we've done here is that we created this community called the GTFS community. And it's the General Transit Feed Specification. And the specification itself is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution License, which means that the format is free. It's on a website that we have access to. Anyone can contribute to it. Anyone can take the format, adapt it, use it however they want. It's fine. If you're an agency, you produce the data in that format, then you own the license on that data when you give that out. So we developed this community around GTFS. Just so we know, there's a whole bunch of producers. These are agencies that develop data in GTFS. Many of them are on Google Maps. You have Brussels, you have Madrid, you have New York, Chicago. We have Travelline in Europe and various others, in the UK rather, various others, and it's growing all the time. So there's a whole lot of agencies. This is part of the community. The community looks like this. Transport agencies are the operators, the people who run buses, the TfLs, the TFGMs, the national rail type organisations. If they produce GTFS, that format is there for any developer to use. Developers can interact with agencies using GTFS. They get the data in this format, and then they can do something with it. They then pass this to users through web and apps and whatever other innovation you want to come up with as a developer. What this means is that an end user can choose which. They're obviously interested primarily in the agency. They don't want to just see random data. I want to see Manchester data. So they're interested in agency, but they can choose a developer. The developer can choose the agency. You can develop once, have many, many agencies, many users. Google doesn't necessarily have to be involved in this at all. We are one developer. We develop this. This is what we do. So this is Google Maps. Who's used Google Maps? Yeah. So it tends to be quite useful, right? But it's kind of slightly limited in that it does what we make it do, and then there's a whole lot of innovation that happens around the place, like Macmins or like Fix My Street stuff, like all this kind of things that happen elsewhere that are really cool innovations that are interesting. We don't do them. But what we do is directions. So you can choose, I want to go from A to B. This is New York. I want to go from A to B. And it tells you, based on the data that New York have given us, get these buses, get this train, whatever. You can also look at New York, or London for that matter, and you'll see the tube map for the city. So that data has come from New York, and as soon as any other agency gives us the data in the right format, we can put it on the map, and they get the same thing. The other thing we do is when you search for Murray's Bagels, New York, which is my favorite bagel restaurant in New York, if you're over there, go and have one. And it'll tell you that here is the local transit. So the local transit is American for transport. But it'll tell you what a local transport is. So people who are looking for something else see, oh, I can also get a public transport. They're kind of cool. But we don't do everything, and there's always room for developers to do iPhone applications, to do other integrations, integrate it with real estate data. As Mental has all that kind of thing. There's all sorts of other things that developers can do. And if they use a format like GCFS, they interact in the right way, and the agencies license their data in the right way and have a relationship, then it works pretty well. So as I say, to quote Steve Ballmer, it's all about developers, developers, developers. That's the thing that enables this. Agencies give out the data, developers do stuff with it. We're one of the developers. We're developing this community that sort of enables the transfer of data and information to end users. If you want to find out more about GCFS, look it up. You can use your favorite search engine. I can give you a hint. Or you can go to google.com/transitpartners. This is our site for transport agencies. Or you can email Richard or me or Razia, or come and talk to us at any stage, or ask questions later. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Jonathan Reaper, CEO of Placer and visiting professor at London University.
So, thanks very much. Yep, moving over to the next presentation. Oh, too far. Okay, there we are. Okay, so I'm going to give you something slightly different here. Just in 5 minutes, 5 slides, some thinking around open data and transport. I've tried to phrase this in a kind of easily digestible form by giving it out as a manifesto. Manifestos should be living documents. This is not closed, not complete, probably not right, possibly mad, but I want you to kind of think about it and come back to me around the principles. Now, this is built upon a proposition that I want to put to you, which I think is actually behind the whole kind of open data mission at the moment. That is, the assumption that we're all working on is that by releasing open data, and open transport data is a really important part of that, we're going to save money because developers are going to build things more efficiently in the government, we're going to create jobs, we're going to increase transparency. And we're going to allow all kinds of aspects of our transport system to be opened up to competition and scrutiny that currently aren't open. The consequence of wanting to do this is that we need early, free, and comprehensive data releases. We're not always getting that for various reasons. So the challenge is at the moment, and of course we're always frustrated that government doesn't move fast enough, but the challenge is to reorganize government, so both central and local, in order to allow this kind of data to get out there. The consequence of delay and not following through on this mission is that companies like mine that are startups, relatively fragile financially, may not succeed. If we don't succeed, there isn't a tier of organizations out there who can actually deliver on this mission. So one of the messages I've got for you today is just give us the good stuff, those of you who are out there with transport data, and let us get working with that. I'm already paying a 5-figure sum in taxes every year with 4 employees in terms of national insurance and income tax and all this kind of stuff. That wasn't there a year ago. It's only there because I've chosen to get into this open data and try and get it out into the marketplace. So what are the principles? Number 1, where there's public money going into the transport system, there must be access. So we can't have stuff walled off in inaccessible locations when we are funding it. Access means redistribution of existing raw data. Let's not jazz it up unnecessarily. Developers are smart people, they can turn it into useful stuff. Who's not doing this? Network Rail. Your taxes are paying for £5 billion a year to support the transport system, in addition to the fares that you pay when you travel. And that money, at the moment, does not yield any open data because Network Rail is a private body with a public task, public regulation, and public guarantees, but it's a private body. And at the moment, it exclusively sub-licenses to the Association of Train Operating Companies, who produce something called National Rail Inquiries. And National Rail Inquiries does not produce open data. It is also a private body. So we have to unravel some of these things or create a new kind of political economy that makes it possible for these private bodies with public tasks to release data, to allow these open data initiatives to flourish. Best practice, the Highways Agency. They give everything away for free, no questions asked, there are 5 terms, it's all on one page. Brilliant, that's what we want. We can really make stuff when we've got that kind of access. Second principle, it's got to be free, and that means really free, because we can only build businesses quickly that employ people, that pay taxes, that produce cool stuff, if we've got low cost bases. So that means free at the point of use, no hidden charges. It means open or attribution only licenses, please. Not complicated licenses that actually take 2 days to evaluate and then 3 weeks to argue over. Bodies not meeting this principle, Travelline, who are our friends, they're good people, they're releasing a lot of real-time and scheduled bus data, do have set-up charges and hit limits. Now, they're a public-private body integrating private bus operators, publicly funded bus operators. In an ideal world, in a world in which I could actually move faster, produce more stuff, it would be free. Best practice, TfL, Tracanet, the tube, real-time tube data, completely free. You can get it, you can be using it in half an hour of discovering it. Third principle, no competition. Please do not use public money to compete with people who are then trying to produce cool stuff, free stuff, to create new businesses, new jobs. The private system integrators who are doing a lot of the valuable work behind the scenes to actually gather data from sensor networks and turn it into free data that can be put out the door are sometimes given unfair advantages because they know they're able to tap into feeds that developers are not able to get access to. We don't want that. That doesn't help build this whole open data community. So if you don't know the story of the MyTFL app, which was released and 3 hours later pulled by Transport for London, have a look on the Placer blog. You will see that MDV, who are the internal system integrator running the Transport for London Journey Planner, released an app with internal privileges and started to compete with people who were using open access data. I was going to say best practice was the London Cycle Hire scheme, where Transport for London haven't released any apps or any services whatsoever, and there are about 8 or 10 very good apps that have been produced by independent developers, but Barclays have just released a brand tie-in app. We didn't know that, and lots of people have done investments without knowing that was going to happen, and that is a shame, because that affects the climate and for people to develop new apps. Fourth principle, equality of access. Please, let's everybody have equal access to the data. So that means documentation. It means that internal communities who may have extra knowledge of how stuff works, they shouldn't be given extra privileges. And on the other side, if we want to move fast, we've got to have the documentation, we've got to have the metadata. The TfL Journey Planner API, which powers quite a lot of apps, all Malcolm Barclays apps, for example, like Tube Deluxe, are built upon a totally undocumented API, it's still in service, which you can only find out how it works by hitting it and finding out when it fails. by a process of a community, kind of behind-the-scenes community, we've actually managed to document how it works. Fortunately, that's going to be replaced with an open version. If you're looking for best practice, what Data GM have done so far is fantastic in terms of documenting, providing metadata. We want to see more of that. And finally, formats. Open data releases should be made in the formats the data is already held in. We see too much. I'm on the London Data Store steering group, and when we go around to agencies, we often hear, well, it's kind of not ready, let's tidy it up, we want to improve it, we've got a project to do this or that or the other. We need to move fast if we're going to succeed, if we're going to stay alive, if we're going to produce stuff. And if it's, as in the case of the iBus project within Transport for London, the project to release real-time bus information, if it's taking 2 years to do a project, to tidy it up into a format that they would like to release it in, but it's already on the bus stops, there's something fundamentally wrong there. Because we can take the stuff that's on the bus stops. It may be messy, it may not be everywhere. We can take it, we can use it, we can get it out. People can mash that up with all kinds of other stuff and produce insanely great new apps that Transport for London, maybe Transport for Greater Manchester, will never think of. Because that's our role in this whole ecosystem, is to produce new stuff. Best practice, well, NAPTAM, the national database of all the bus stops and all the train stations and ferry stops and everything in the whole country is out there. You can grab it, you can use it, you can build stuff on it. Get out there and do it. We're doing this. Go and have a look at our website. We have all our stuff is free on the web. We get paid when we put it into an app and make it easier to use, more convenient for you. Otherwise, you can get schools data, crime data, all sorts of other stuff in addition to transport data. Go and have a look at it. And please let me be here in a year's time and still be alive, not be bankrupt and a footnote in history, because this whole movement didn't go fast enough. Thanks very much.
Next we have Tom Steinberg, open data pioneer and founder of sites like fixmystreet.com.
Being an open data pioneer is so much less good than being an actual pioneer. Just a quick question here after those talks. Put your hands up if you're in favour of locking up public transport data and keeping it outside forever. Just one perverse hand at the back from someone in my society. I'm from my society. My society is a charity that builds sites that let you do things like work out who is my politician, how do I write to them, how do they vote, how do I get information out of the government, how do I get potholes in my street fixed, that kind of thing is what we're all about. And because I don't have to persuade anybody in this room open data is a good idea, I'm going to do something else, which is to just show you some ways in which you might use open transport data in a way that isn't what you normally think of transport data as being for. And we usually think of transport data as being for getting me from this building today to somewhere down the road slightly later today. We are all used to transport data fundamentally being about journey planning, solving today's problem. And we have 2 different projects that are that show that transport data is useful in very, very different ways. And that is really all I'm going to do now. So this is Mapumental, that's a picture of Manchester, and the big splodge on it represents everywhere that you could live if you wanted to commute to this building, leaving your house no later than 8:34 in the morning and get here at 9 o'clock. So that represents the areas in Manchester you could live for a reasonably okay commute to get here every day. If that's not the right kind of commute, if that's the wrong amount of time, then we can make it more. We can put it up to an hour, or we can put it down to, I don't know, just like 15 minutes. And you get to see the areas that covers, that makes for acceptable commutes. If it's not okay to just be 30 minutes and you actually care about money, you little people, anyway, then you can say, actually, I can't afford to live in a £500,000 house or a £300,000 house or even a £200,000 house. I can only afford to live in a £120,000 house. This is the areas that are still within 30 minutes commute to this building we're in here that are essentially cheap enough to go and live in. That's an example of a service that uses transport data that is not about planning tomorrow's journey. This is about planning every journey for the next 10 or 20 years in your life. So it's not something you use every day, but it is something you might use when you're house hunting or job hunting that would potentially help you make a very, very big decision. This is a demo. It's not yet fully a commercial project, and we're looking to build products spun off it. So if you're interested, please drop a mail to hello@mysociety.org and we'll talk to you about that. So that's one thing that comes from the commercial side of our operation, but we're a charity first and foremost, and here's something from the charitable side. This is Fixed Mode Transport, which is very much in alpha at the moment. And Fixed Mode Transport is a service that will make it possible to not merely say there's a problem on a certain route or at a bus stop or a train stop or a train station, but that will help you to get other people to join you in trying to persuade a transport company to do something different. Why is this necessary? Why is it not enough to just be a sort of like complaining service? Well, firstly, because kind of complaining on its own is not necessarily kind of the nicest or most useful thing, it doesn't help transport companies build relationships with their users. But much more important than that, if you go to a transport company and you say, I've got some problem with my transport route, or in the case of my house, there's supposed to be a bus stop at the end of my road. The bus stop doesn't actually exist. It's in the database, but it's not there. None of the drivers really know whether or not they should stop. That kind of transport problem, I almost certainly cannot get solved on my own. I can almost certainly only get it solved if me and a variety of people who live where I do come together and we go to the transport company and try and sort of like negotiate. And Fixed Mode Transport is all about turning what could begin as just merely a complaint, just like there's a problem here, and turning it into this is a thing that 20 or 30 of us care about. This is a completely made-up example that I just made on the Fixed Mode Transport demo, so don't complain if you happen to know that the number 1 bus does actually run every 15 minutes. Fixed Mode Transport, as this page shows better, is completely dependent on open transport data. So we have a lot of bus routes and bus stops. In fact, David was talking about having 14,000 stops, and that was being difficult to manage. We have 330,000 stops in here, although unlike David, we don't actually have to look after them. We have every route, we have every form of every multimodal transport, and that all comes out of NAPTAN, the dataset I mentioned before. And it requires lots of scrubbing before you can do things like make this map here. Fixed Mode Transport, again, is not a journey planner, but could not exist without all those maps, without all that transport data, and it will get better if we get better transport data. So this is my penultimate thought here. Imagine you were on a train that was incredibly chronically late. If we have nice real-time transport data, then when you go to your mobile phone version of Fixed Mode Transport and say, you open the page or the app and you say there's a problem, it will be able to guess from a combination of your location and the fact that you're on the latest piece of public transport that is in that area. It will guess that because you've come to the page at that point in time that you're probably on that train, just because it can tell that that train's really late and all the others aren't. So it will be able to give you a better user experience. That's the kind of incredibly unintuitive thing that you can get out of transport data. And we are merely a small charity. What the rest of late capitalism can do with this stuff, I don't know. So my final thought is to support a lot of what Jonathan just said about the need to persuade some big and not massively accountable organisations that a lot of this has to be put out. What's going on in Manchester is brilliant, and it is an exemplar and should be shouted from the rooftops, and it should in particular be used to embarrass people who think that being less good is an option. A really straightforward thing to say, and it's a very classic thing to suggest, is write to your MP. Write to your MP who will never have heard of this issue and say, please write to the Secretary of State for Transport to say, I care about open data, just like the Guardians for Our Data campaign, just like these various other people. Just write a couple of hundred words. They will then pass it on to the Department of Transport, and in a drip way, the pressure that is already on that department to enforce its powers over things like Network Rail will get stronger, and the side of the right and the good will be more likely to win. If you don't know how to write to your MP, then My Society runs a website called writetothem.com, which will help you do it. That is the end of everything I have to say, and now on to the more interesting Q&A. So I guess we can all come on.
Okay, so we'll invite the panel back on stage. Razi, do you want to come up too? Because we also have Razi Ahmed from Google, and you can ask her questions as well. Okay, so we've got a roaming mic. I And so if you'd like to ask a question, do we have any volunteers to go first?
One at a time, please.
So if you, any questions for any, yep.
Hello. I've just got a sort of general question. I didn't hear the whole of the presentation, but it's just to get a little bit more clarification on the comment made by one of the speakers that your data sets don't need to be cleaned up. You just put them up there. I run the IT department for the British Museum, and we're about to put up a data set. Well, I hope we are. It's not quite. We're not quite there yet. So just
I rest my case.
just a little bit more information as to why you don't have to clean it up would be helpful to me as a head of IT.
Well, time is the principal reason, because early access is vital. The other thing is that a lot of cleaning up involves doing things that we wouldn't necessarily need to be done. So it's a kind of duplication. So you'll do a lot of tidying, you'll remove some fields or whatever. You may not have thought of the kind of applications or uses we could put those fields to. I mean, even if we don't want to use the fields in the database, we might be able to use it to index it in some way or whatever. The more raw it is, then the better it is for us because it's faster and because it contains more of a signal, if you like, coming through from the original raw data source. A lot of data sources are given to us now. People have cleaned them up out of the best possible motives, but actually what they've done in some cases emasculated the data, and it makes it much harder to get something out of it. I mean, the whole point of open data releases is to save money, so that any time spent in the public sector cleaning it up is actually undermining the mission in one sense.
Yeah, I'd give another slightly different answer. I endorse that, but I have two other reasons why you should do it. One is because the public can correct things that you can't, because they'll know things that are wrong with your data that no matter how long you spend tidying up, you'll never spot because you don't have as many brains as everybody in the public. The other thing is how many people are in your team who can help clean up and build the systems?
Not so many.
How many engineers does Google employ?
10,000, but they're
Yeah.
all pretty up to date.
There is an ability, there is a technology talent pool out there, literally 1 million times bigger than you have, and some of those people will spend their time cleaning your data. So why wouldn't you?
I just put a caveat on that and understand the issue about the technical bits, but nevertheless there is the issue of local knowledge and understanding, and we have a small team who do spend their time cleaning up data, mostly information that's supplied by the bus operators. So be grateful that we're doing that because the data is patchy, it's inaccurate, and there is and it's the level of people who know the area, they understand the situations.
But there's a kind of commercial decision that we have to
Yes.
take, which is having nothing is a whole lot worse than having something that's patchy, where we can say, look, there's a hole here, and we have ways of displaying that.
Indeed.
Kind of deal.
I'm absolutely with you in terms of getting. I'd rather get data out there that is acknowledged to be not perfect, but we have to do some data checking anyway for our own, for the things that we're doing internally. So it's a balance between just giving you the straight stuff or giving you a cleaned up.
There's another issue here, isn't there? And that is if the private bus operators are giving you poor data, the very fact that that's poor data, we can also convey into the public domain, and that puts pressure back onto them to improve their performance. Ironically.
I wish it was as easy as that.
Well, try it.
I think there's a couple of those things, like, no data is not very good. Some data that is broken a little bit or is in a funny format, in an unusual format or undocumented format is better than no data. And then as you if you want to invest a little more, it becomes better because any developer will benefit from having multiple data formats multiple data sources that are good and in a consistent format. And so if an agency or an organization wants to benefit from a large-scale organization, then you kind of do need to do a little bit of putting it into a common format or a documented format at least.
If
You get more benefit the more you do, but it's still benefit in giving it out.
But if he gave us data that was differently, had different quality from different bus companies, we would make a leaderboard and say, this is crap, this is not so crap, this is really good. He can't do that, actually, but we can do that. That's an example of something where actually just passing it on in the form that it's in allows us to do a bit of cleansing, and to make that public.
Okay, we might just
Have you made a note of that, John?
We might just jump to any more questions. Yeah, at the back, the mic will come just to you. If you'd like to say your name as well before your question.
Sure. Hello, Neil Clavin, design strategist. First of all, I'd like to really congratulate David Hytch on the release of the public data for Manchester Transport. I think that's a great achievement, and the list of stuff that you're sending out there and making public is really, really admirable and a really good benchmark for other transport services. I have two questions. One is, how do we get this data, and what is actually, we can see what the incentive is perhaps for Manchester's transport system, but what is the incentive for people to develop and build stuff with this data in the near term and long term? Is there a prize? Is there sponsorship? Are people allowed to take this as an open license for commercial exploitation?
The data is available on the DataGM portal, so that's where all of the public sector data for Greater Manchester is lodged, if you like. In terms of what can people do with it? Well, it's an open, free-to-use license. As I said, I don't know what people want to do with it, which is part of the reason to make it open. Is I can't imagine. I mean, I love the application, and indeed, it's going straight back into a discussion this afternoon about the transport planning that we're doing, and how do we understand what it is that people want. Because I want to do the same sort of thing, not just for, say, bus routes, but for walking and cycling accessibility, and not just in central Manchester, but for the other 9 towns and cities around the conurbation. I don't know what people can do with it. I want them, I mean, it's there, it's a resource. If somebody wants to develop something and make money out of it, brilliant, because I hope that it'll be people within Greater Manchester, which is adding to jobs and the economy and developing awareness and understanding. If it's not, well, that's the way it goes. Okay, I mean, if somebody's got a good idea and they want to come and sell it to us, I'm more than welcome to listen. But if they want to go and sell it to someone else, that's fine as well.
Thank you. Do you want to add to that? We'll just get the roaming mic. Yeah.
Just adding to what Dave was saying, I think the answer is there's probably no prize. By making the data available, he was just saying, go and make business out of it, commercialise it, do what you want with it, exploit it for your own benefit, and then the travelling public of Manchester will benefit.
Okay. We're out of time, so if you'd like to join me in thanking our panel, we have David, Richard, Jonathan, Tom, and Razia. Thank you.